Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Russo. I am an IMC student here at Ole Miss from St. Louis, Missouri, and I would like to introduce to you Mr. Dennis Hecht, and after his presentation, Mr. Dan Heffernan.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. I'm Dennis. It's great to be here. Thank you, Dr. Husney, for the invitation to speak. I know a lot of this morning we've been talking about content, and we're going to still talk a lot about content, but we're also going to talk a lot about data today. And so if you haven't grabbed your Red Bull post-lunch, maybe you should do that to help stay awake. And we're going to talk about data because data is sort of the buzzword today in media, in publishing, and the reason we're talking a lot about data is because we're starting to understand more and more what data we have available to us, how we can integrate that data together, and then most importantly, how we can use that data to create actionable insights and then apply those insights to create personalized experiences for our audience who we just so love. I have a great fortune of working for a 142-year-old flagship media company, Farm Journal, and it was started, this is actually a kind of a copy of the first issue of Farm Journal ever printed. It started in Philadelphia, and basically Wilmer would ride out every day, horseback's ride, and deliver papers to people. And he was really great at creating valuable content that people wanted to consume. A lot of farmers, so we're going to talk a lot about agriculture today. We're going to talk a lot about corn, livestock, sustainability, so hopefully maybe some of my examples might resonate. But what Wilmer didn't know was that he was creating this like omnichannel, huge multimedia company, and this is kind of a snapshot of what we are today. We're events, we're magazines, we're TV, we're radio, we're mobile texting, we're newsletters, we're digital. We are 50 million interactions with farmers on a monthly basis. And the reason that number is so important is because each one of those interactions, it gives us an opportunity to capture a piece of data about our audience so that we can study and learn from their behavior and then create insights based on those actual behaviors. So maybe just kind of taking a step back, we'll talk a little bit about data and then kind of dig into some of the examples and how we're applying data today to create experiences and also drive revenue. We kind of look at data in terms of like 5 big buckets, really 4 buckets that drive the 5th one, which is going to be value. Kind of start with volume in terms of just more data coming in than ever before. And I think I read a stat at one point that said in the last 5 years, we've generated more data than we have in our entire lifetime. So there's more data than ever before. And because we have all these new channels, we have all kinds of formats or varieties of data that we need to be comfortable with understanding, integrating together. We need to understand how a download or a view or a magazine delivery integrates with a banner ad view or a banner ad click or an event attendance session that somebody went to. All those experiences need to come together to truly understand what the audience is thinking, what that farmer is thinking, and how can we better serve that farmer through deep learning and deep understanding of what's interesting to them. And then veracity. Veracity is super important here because I know we've talked a little bit today about some of the scary nature of data, which I can definitely appreciate. And there's a lot of new regulations coming into place Certainly, folks might be familiar with GDPR or CCPA, but a lot of data regulations from Europe and California. And it's forcing us to surface data to our audiences to allow them to have a voice in saying, what can I share or not share with client advertisers? And I love that. I think if you're in the data community, you love that you can give data security and privacy back to the consumer because they can ultimately be the controller of their own experience and ultimately decide what the value is that they want served up to them. And so the companies that embrace that are going to be the companies that succeed. So why are we talking about data? We're talking about data because opinion against opinion, seniority wins, opinion against data, data wins, data against data, the best data wins. So the companies that capture the best data, that can deliver that to their advertisers, that can deliver that to their audience is going to be the company that wins coming out of this. And we're a little bit on the brink of a transformation here. This is one of my favorite issues of HBR. It's actually from 2016 where we were talking about the digital transformation and everyone kind of getting on board with that. And now I believe we're really on this cusp of the data-driven transformation and companies really getting excited about the data that they can harness from their brands and the insights that they can create. Data ages a little bit like wine. So companies that want to get into the data business or want to harvest from their operations the data that they have, just know it's going to be a little bit of a journey. You can't just get into the data business tomorrow. You're going to start sort of with raw data here at the bottom, which is kind of lower value. But then over time, as you think about how you can integrate data together, you might say, well, I know Farmer Joe read a story about corn, and that would be a raw data point. Then maybe you'd say, well, Farmer Joe read a story about corn, and I also know he has 100 acres of corn. Okay, that might be value add. Integrated might be we're working with a manufacturer that knows that this person purchased corn seed from their company. Okay, now we've got some more value. Then we might move to predictive, which is, okay, we know this person read a story in the last 90 days about a certain type of corn that would perform really well on their soil types. We're moving into predictive intent, purchase intent. And then prescriptive, moving even further by putting more data sets together and saying, not only do we know this person's going to buy, but we should recommend this specific corn seed to them because it's going to perform the best on their soil types. So the more timely, unique, and actionable that data is, the more value you're going to create. And the way where we kind of start in terms of where do we think about creating value, we kind of start at the decisions level, granularity, and boiling everything back to an individual, demographic information. A lot of us are thinking about behavior. We're going to spend quite a bit more time thinking about behavioral data. And for us, we're thinking about two types there. We're thinking about endemic and non-endemic. So endemic meaning like related to the industry and related to, for Farm Journal, agricultural behaviors. So who's thinking about corn? Who's thinking about sustainability practices for their farm? And then non-endemic, we're thinking about interesting additional layers, such as like, does this person like to go to theme parks? Do they want to go to Six Flags? And what does that mean about how we create a new experience for them that's sort of outside of the box, but inside of what they're comfortable with and how they want to interact with us? Of course, data becomes more powerful with transactional data, research data. The more stuff we're layering together, the more we can move towards transformation and really impacting an experience that is going to resonate with the consumer at the other end, resonate with the farmer, but also an experience that's going to drive sales, that's going to create revenue for the company. Because sort of at the end of the day, we're all selling something, we all want to sell more of it, and we want everyone to be successful. So to create those win-win opportunities, we need to layer that data together, think through what are the insights that we can create, and then also how can we leverage data science. And this starts to get into statistics, and it starts to get into having team players that know how to build neural networks and different lookalike models. I've got a team of 2 people. One of them is a particle collision physics PhD that just joined the team, so you don't have to maybe know everything about farming or maybe everything about data, but there's opportunities for people to add value in terms of thinking differently and thinking about how to bring data together to create insights. So this is just sort of a really simple framework, thinking it through, how are we going to actually start to create value. So we're moving into maybe a situation that we can walk through, which is, we want to articulate a problem. So maybe that problem is we want more farmers to have sustainable no-tillage practices on their farm. Then we're going to move into gather the data. We're going to look at the data we have. We're going to look at our digital databases. We're going to look into our CRM. We're going to look into Excels on people's computers. We're going to look at events data. We're going to look at print data, who's getting different things, how are people following those call to actions. Then we're going to put all that data into a central repository, prepare the data, process it, and get it ready for a machine learning application that will hopefully take something like 600 data points in a rows, columns spreadsheet, and then sort of make sense of what data attributes in that large set are driving farmers to adopt sustainable practices, and maybe where are there gaps in that data set that we can bridge to help people adopt no-tillage practices, ultimately so we can drive more revenue. And maybe an example would be a company that sells cover crop seed. If you sell somebody cover crop seed and we see that they're actually planting that on their farm, it is an incentive for them to practice no-till. So then we can kind of tie the story all the way back together. We can help change a behavior sort of for like the betterment of the farming community, but we can also help create an opportunity for companies to position more of their product with the right people. So a little bit of the secret sauce in terms of how this works. Typically where we'll start is we'll look at our digital platforms. We'll look at stories posted, and then we are running natural language processing tools across these pieces of content that's distilling out different topics that are important to the audience. And what it's doing then is assigning an affinity. And we're using different KPIs in there. Linda actually talked about some of them this morning, which is like the number of visits, the number of page views, the length of time that you're spending on the different pieces of content. And then we're using an algorithm in there to assign an affinity score to each individual person. And then we're putting that into a data science intent model. And so we're kind of pulling out the people that have this opportunity to engage and who have engaged into an intent model and saying, if these are the people that are highly engaged, what can we understand about them to kind of create a model that says these are the people most likely to buy. Then we go back into the broader database, which could be like 1 million farmers. We'll segment those people according to different personas, layer in the intent model, and then basically we're driving awareness down to purchase. So I think there's kind of a couple of interesting takeaways here. One is that we know it's important to think about intent at the top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. And what we often talk about with our customers is sort of like ripping out a layer. Like, how could you skip a step? Like, can you skip a step by using data by creating these experiences and just by understanding and listening to the audience and learning what's important to them to make that conversion happen faster. This is that's kind of a look under the hood, and then sort of what happens, what we see. Then putting this to work is we'll go out, we'll talk to that sustainability company that sells cover crop seed, and we'll talk about a content strategy. We'll say, what are these specific behaviors that you're trying to elicit? Do you want to know who's interested in cover crops now? Do you want to know who's interested in a certain variety of cover crops? Do you want to know who's not interested in cover crops but might be interested if they could get $100 an acre rebate by going to the NRCS and filing an application that says, hey, I put this on my land, so now my grain is worth like X dollars more per bushel. Anyway, I get carried away, but it's the point is you can be very, very specific and try and elicit those specific behaviors, right, through engagement. And it's not going to be just like one click, one story. It's got to be multiple stories, multiple channels, and then you have to get all those pieces together. We make some assumptions and a hypothesis about how we want to divide up the audience. And then basically this kind of model then runs in real time. You don't see any of that work. That's fully automated through marketing technology. We're decisioning that content out to the people based on their interests, and we're serving that content. We've got bots and natural language processing tools processing that content in real time, feeding into data science models, outputting predictive and prescriptive reporting. And then we're headed back to the client to have another discussion about, is our hypothesis correct? What does that mean for how we want to matrix the audience moving forward? And then how does that feed into our content strategy? This is important because we can sort of think through, at the end of the day, the customer journey that we want to create, that experience that we're trying to elicit and also understand. So this can start with maybe a call from a call center, but it could also start from a piece of content, right? And it could also be that we're trying to look at the end result and we want to go back to the data and listen and see where do those key points of attribution occur, so we can make sure that we're placing content and engagement opportunities at the right time. This is, so that's just kind of one example of understanding intent and content. This is just a variety of questions that we're thinking about today. We're doing a lot of work in behavioral data, but we're also thinking a lot about different models, how to make people smarter and make decisions better and faster for their customers. So unlock the value through data today. There's tons of opportunities. I think I'm right at 20 minutes. I think I could maybe take a question if there is a question. Yeah.
You're using this data also to build individual magazines with separate signatures.
Yep.
Can you describe that process for the group?
Yeah, so Farm Journal actually sends out, I believe, 20,000 different versions of the magazine on a monthly basis. we've been databasing since 1965, and what we've learned is that when we ask people to share more about their operation, so in farming specifically, we know if people grow corn or have beef cattle or dairy cattle. Then when we go to print through this electronic binding, then we can insert pieces of content into that magazine. So let's say, for example, if you have corn and no beef cows, then we will insert the corn story along with sort of our standard set of pieces of content, but then not the cattle story. But if you told us that you have cattle or have an interest in cattle, then we're going to put that story back in there. And then we kind of try to recreate that experience also online in terms of where you're going and what those top stories are that are surfaced to you in the digital environment.
And you've been using this electronic binder since the 80s.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, it's sort of a blessing to kind of have this much access to this much data, and certainly means being a steward of that, because a lot of farmers people have to trust us as publishers to handle their data appropriately, securely, and do the right thing. Yes, Jim.
How is this, you talked about the process,
Mm-hmm.
but I know this is used a lot in advertising, brand studio work, a lot of advertising. Can you take this to an advertising level?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So the question was that the insights here are typically taken to an advertiser standpoint, and how would that apply for an advertiser? So I think yeah. There's so many ways that I'm just stutter stepping because I'm trying. You almost have to narrow it down to a specific example. But a classic example that we're working through with different advertisers is that they know they want to go to market with a product, and that product is going to resonate differently with 4 different types of personas. So there might be, let's say you're trying to sell a drone, right? We know that there's farmers that are early adopters and innovators. We know that there's farmers that are progressive and thinking about their bottom line ROI. There's sort of this like traditionalist farmer that's the fast follower, and then there's kind of maybe like a laggard bucket that is just kind of waiting for their exit. And so what we can do is we can take those personas, we map our behavioral data insights based on their engagement in a variety of topics, not only evergreen topics, but also news topics that tell us kind of how they're thinking. Map it to those personas, then we share those personas back into the database so that when the advertiser is serving a digital ad or a mobile message or a print ad, that they can then serve up 4 different types of messages so that, and then we can measure the engagement. And it's sort of a constant feedback loop, because we know, Olivia, and pick on you, is that you might not be 100% early adopter, or you might be an early adopter of a certain product, but you might not be an early adopter for drones. So we adjust those models, monitor them, and then kind of serve them back up and adjust them, knowing that everyone's sort of a little bit of something